Hey, welcome to O'Brien Builds. I'm Gregory O'Brien, and this is what I'm working on. Today I'm going to be installing a heater in the van. Up until this point, I haven't had anything in there as far as a source of heat, so pretty excited about that. All of the information I needed for this install came primarily from two different sources. First is the Far Out Ride. They have really good explanations for pretty much everything van related. But for this, they went into a lot of detail explaining the different means and methods of heating. So because of that, I decided to go with a Wabasto gasoline powered heater. And then the second video was just an explanation of how to assemble the heater and all of the different components. This is very helpful because the heater itself doesn't come with any assembly instructions. Couple of things I really like. Number one, it's gasoline powered, so it'll connect directly into the main fuel tank. The other thing is the combustion that takes place for the heating unit exhausts outside and is separate from the air that's actually heated and dispersed through the van. Looks like a pretty beefy unit. Might actually be big enough to heat the entire van from this location. But if not, I'm going to run ducting underneath this walkway here. So I'll have exhaust ports here at the door. I'll have a central location in the middle of the van, and then possibly one more vent all the way at the back underneath where the bed will be. Even though it's a larger unit, we've got plenty of space in here. This will tuck down here, will be mounted to the floor. Air intake on the front. Eventually my separating wall is going to be about right here. So I've got plenty of room to come out the back of the seat, make a turn, and right here about is where my 3.5-inch ducting will go down underneath the van, run under the doorway, and then pop back up at the sink. One of the primary criteria for installation was to have an airtight seal where the unit is mounted to the floor. And the reason for that is to prevent carbon monoxide from building up under the van and leaking back into the van itself. The area under the passenger seat in the Ford Transit is mostly flat, so I didn't have to worry about using the mounting plate. However, the downside is because of the framing underneath, there was really only one spot to fit the heater. From where I had to put the heater, I ended up having to cut a hole in the front of the seat base. Also, since I wasn't using the mounting plate, I wasn't able to pre-attach my exhaust and air intake lines, but I was able to run the fuel line before putting the unit in place. As you can see, there's pretty much no room to work underneath. There's the framing on one side, and then the heat shield for the radiator on the other. So I took advantage of that little bump out on the heat shield. Gave me just enough access to get washers and nuts onto those bolts. Because again, the primary thing was to get a solid seal between the bottom of the heater and the floor of the van. And then same thing too, since I wasn't able to pre-attach the exhaust and air intake, I had to do those after the fact, which was tight, but still manageable. The second component that needs to be installed for the heater is the fuel pump. On the Ford Transit, there's an auxiliary fuel port located in the center of the fuel tank. It's actually pretty straightforward to access it. I took the front three brackets off that were holding the fuel tank. It was actually really straightforward. I had a jack under the front of the tank. I loosened those three brackets and I was able to lower it down. One of my primary concerns going into that, because my tank was like 3/4 full, was that it might warp the fuel tank or it might bend, but the tank is it's mounted on the bottom of the car, so obviously it's very rigid, very durable. So that wasn't an issue at all. Once I put my auxiliary fuel port access on, I raised my fuel tank again, and I found the simplest answer was to just mount my fuel pump bracket to one of the brackets for the fuel tank itself. Once the heater and the fuel pump are installed, it's just a matter of connecting electricity down to the fuel pump, and connecting the fuel line up to the heater, as well as protecting those lines, especially where they cross over the exhaust. I had to put an extra heat shield on there, and then also securing the exhaust piping and the air intake. The exhaust line should run over to the edge of the van, just to prevent carbon monoxide from building up underneath it, just in case there are any air leaks in your floor. With the heater installed, hooked up to power, and the fuel pump on there as well, we're ready to start kicking out some heat. Obviously, once I get more into the van build, I'm going to get all fancy with running my electrical, making it look nice, potentially running that extra ducting as well. But for right now, we'll have hot air, and it'll be a little more comfortable through this cold weather.